With the casting of characters like Lucius Malfoy and Cornelius Fudge being announced for the new HBO Harry Potter TV show, there's been a lot of speculation online and in the comments of my previous videos about changes that the show might be implementing to make it different from the movies and the books. So far, my episodes have pretty much been direct adaptations from page to screen. However, as the story heats up and time starts to run out, I have started to make some minor changes in order to allow the story to run a little more smoothly and to not confuse the audience. This is especially prevalent in this episode as we encounter our first of many Hagrid mini subplots. So let's jump in to Season 1, Episode 6, Norbert. The episode starts with previously on Harry Potter, recapping the events from the previous episode, along with a few other things that are important for the overall mystery. We briefly see the events regarding the Mirror of Erised, and a brief snippet of the conversation between Dumbledore and Harry. We then recap the robbery at Gringotts, the discovery of a giant three-headed dog named Fluffy by Hagrid, and the uncovering of the Philosopher's Stone from the end of the previous episode. And finally, the incident at the Quidditch match, where they saw Snape jinxing Harry's broom and trying to kill him. This is the final clip of the recap because this episode will start at the end of a muddy training session with the Gryffindor Quidditch team. As they are getting changed, Oliver Wood informs the team that Snape will be refereeing their upcoming match against Hufflepuff. Shocked by the startling news of Snape's desire to suddenly become a Quidditch referee, we then cut to Harry in the Gryffindor common room talking to Ron and Hermione. They both try to convince Harry not to play, but Harry, being our brave hero, insists on participating in the match. Harry says, "If I don't play, all the Slytherins will think I'm too scared to face Snape. I'll show them. It'll really wipe the smiles off their faces if we win." We cut to black, which cues the title sequence for the show. The following scene takes heavy inspiration from not only how the scene is portrayed in the book, but also from suggestions that many people have made in the comments about wanting to see more things not from Harry's perspective. We pick up with Ron and Hermione walking down to the Quidditch pitch with the rest of the school, who are all excitedly discussing their predictions for the match. They filter into the stadium just in time to see the Gryffindor and Hufflepuff teams from a distance walking onto the pitch, and as Snape blows his whistle, the camera switches focus to Ron and Hermione nervously watching the game. The rest of the scene then plays out in one continuous, unbroken shot. Malfoy, Crabbe and Goyle then appear behind Hermione, Ron and Neville, and we get the incredible moment where Neville and Ron fight the Slytherin trio whilst Hermione nervously watches the match. I have this vision of the camera relentlessly swiveling around to catch the fight, and then Hermione watching the match, and then the Quidditch match from afar before swiveling back to the fight again. I really think this would be an incredibly stylistic sequence, especially with the focus being what's going on in the stands instead of what's going on the Quidditch pitch, as we've just had a major Quidditch match in the previous episode. The scene then concludes with a POV shot from Hermione's binoculars of Harry streaking towards Snape before shooting past him to catch the snitch. The scene then shifts to Harry leaving the changing room later on in the evening with his Nimbus 2000 over his shoulder. As he is heading back to the castle, he sees a hooded figure in the distance that he recognises as Snape, so he hops on his Nimbus 2000 to silently follow him from above. He hovers above the trees before witnessing the meeting between Snape and Quirrell, and seeing what he believes to be Snape threatening Quirrell into helping him to capture the Philosopher's Stone. The scene then ends with Snape leaving Quirrell standing nervously alone, whilst Harry is hovering above them, looking shocked. We cut to black to end sequence 1. Before I go on, I just want to say thank you so much for all of the support I've received on the channel so far. It's been absolutely incredible, and I'm so grateful to all of you. And if I could ask a huge favour and ask you to subscribe and drop a like, it will really help me out as I look to grow this channel even further. Anyway, let's hop back into the episode with the start of Sequence 2. Sequence 2 will begin with Harry, Ron and Hermione discussing the events in the Gryffindor common room of what Harry just witnessed. Ron confirms his long-standing suspicion of Snape, and Hermione correctly theorises that there must be other things guarding the stone. This short scene ends with the trio resigning themselves to the fact that they need to keep an eye on Snape, Quirrell and Fluffy. We then move into a new Hogwarts changing motif, highlighting the change from winter to spring, with the Hogwarts grounds becoming greener and greener. We will also see short montage clips of the trio walking past Fluffy's door and pressing their ear against it, and smiling at Quirrell in an encouraging way whenever they walk past him in the corridor. We then jump to the library with the trio studying hard for their upcoming exams, before they notice Hagrid looking very out of place in the library. I love the idea of Hagrid squeezing himself between bookshelves and doing a terrible job at hiding himself when Harry sees him. We then get the interaction between them, with Hagrid inviting the trio down to his cabin that evening, and once he leaves, the trio go to investigate what books Hagrid was studying. When they realise that Hagrid was studying dragons, the show gives Ron another chance to shine as he informs Harry and Hermione all about dragons and the laws on dragon breeding. Like an idea I had in my episode 4 video, when Ron was explaining to Harry all about trolls, I would like to include some excerpts from the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them book, all about dragons, and again, potentially getting Newt Scamander to narrate the information given. And a slight change from what we saw in the movie and the book will be the camera slowly panning from the trio's conversation to a neighbouring aisle, where we will see Draco Malfoy eavesdropping slyly on their conversation. And another change will be, instead of the trio visiting Hagrid's twice to see the egg and then to see the egg hatching, the scene with Norbert the Norwegian Ridgeback will play out pretty much identically to the movie. However, this time I would like to see a little more shock and fear from the trio rather than the amazement they displayed in the movie, especially when Hermione says, "Hagrid, you live in a wooden house." The sequence then ends as they notice a pale, pointed face staring through the window. They run to the window and see Draco Malfoy retreating back to the castle. We cut to black to end Sequence 2. Sequence 3 of the episode takes place in a way that also mixes events fairly heavily from what we saw in the movie and in the book, and I'll explain why at the end of the video. We pick up with the trio begrudgingly walking down to Hagrid's hut, discussing the situation that has rapidly developed over the past week. Whilst at Hagrid's, when they see the size of Norbert now, Harry comes up with the idea to write to Ron's brother Charlie, who works with dragons in Romania. And after a lot of discussion and much convincing, Hagrid finally agrees. We then cut to the Gryffindor common room a few days later on the night that they are supposed to meet up with Charlie's friends, with Harry and Hermione sitting in the common room waiting for Ron. Neville then comes into the common room and tells Harry and Hermione that Ron has been admitted in the hospital wing after being bitten by something. Harry and Hermione then rush off to the hospital wing to go and see Ron, and as they leave, Neville tries shouting a word of warning to them as they are clambering out of the portrait hole about Malfoy. However, they don't pay any attention to Neville as they are in such a rush to go and see Ron. When they arrive in the hospital wing, Ron tells them in a panic that Malfoy came to borrow a book from Ron, when really he just wanted to sneer at Ron, and the book that he borrowed contained Charlie's reply letter. However, Harry and Hermione realise it's too late to change the plan, and we arrive at our climax scene of the episode. Harry and Hermione arrive at Hagrid's cabin to collect Norbert in a crate before smuggling him under the invisibility cloak back into the castle. On their way to the tallest tower, they come across Malfoy being accosted by Professor McGonagall, who was trying to catch Harry and Hermione out of bed. Laughing at Malfoy, they head to the top of the tower and meet Charlie's friends before helping them to attach Norbert's crate to their brooms. They head back down the spiral staircase, still laughing at Malfoy, and as they open the door at the bottom of the stairs, they see Filch's face loom out of the darkness, grinning maniacally as they realise they had left the invisibility cloak at the top of the tower. Cue the credits. In the book, the events that I covered in Sequence 3 take place over numerous visits to Hagrid and conversations in many different locations, and due to the time limits of the episode, I just wanted to condense it down ever so slightly. I also didn't want to jump around too much, as too much jumping around between different locations can make it confusing for the audience to know when and where these scenes are happening. And finally, I wanted to include Neville's attempt at a warning, as it will add a little bit more context for the audience as to why he will play a prominent role in the next episode. I'll be back next time to plan out the penultimate episode of this season. Season 1, Episode 7.